Welcome to Exhuming the Truth, the podcast where we delve into the mysterious worlds of cold cases, missing persons, true crime, and the fascinating science that is forensics. I'm forensic scientist and criminologist Asha Walther, and I am so thrilled to have you with me on this journey as we dance in the shadows of the world of crime, shining a light on scientific discovery while becoming another voice for those who need it most. So grab a drink and get comfortable while we jump into this episode together. This podcast is recommended for persons over the age of 18 and contains explicit content not suitable for minors. We will be covering sensitive content that ranges from sexual assault, physical, mental, social, and emotional abuse, suicide, homicide, murder, attempted murder, and other violent crimes, including crimes involving weapons and drugs. This often extends to drug misuse and other harmful and illegal activity. If you find any content to be distressing, I have listed a number of resources that may be able to help you in the podcast notes. Hello and happy Tuesday, and thank you for being here and for listening. Today we have a really important episode, but before we jump into that, I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping. I've just had a couple of days off because I had my best friend fly over from Melbourne, which was really fun. We always cause absolute chaos together, which is really nice and out of the ordinary because life is very family and work orientated until she comes over and I get to have a little bit of me time and a little bit of fun, I guess. So that was really nice. So thank you so much to everyone being super patient with me over those few days. There's so much going on right now, so many new cases in the news, so many things coming up like inquests and searches and things like that. So I think we're going to be super busy and might even be adding the occasional extra podcast here and there. I'm thinking maybe 3 one week and 2 the next, but I'll get your feedback on that and see how we're going. Before I jump into the next episode for today, I just wanted to say I watched a movie last night. It was based on a true story and I watched it on Prime. It was called The Sound of Freedom, or maybe even just Sound of Freedom. It was amazing. It was a great watch, very easy to watch, very distressing storyline, although it was a true story. It definitely made me cry. And I'm not a huge crier, so yeah, it made me cry. It's along the lines of human trafficking, particularly of children, and that's one of the biggest violations of human rights globally. So it sends a really important message. There is kind of a silver lining to the story, and the man who is sort of the main character and the work that he does is amazing. So I do recommend watching that if you have time. But I'll leave it short and sweet at that, and we can get into this next episode that has taken me a lot of time to get to where I want to have it. And I think a large part of that is obviously because it's a very complex case, and this is actually a case that has obviously occurred and it has already been to the coroner's court. So we are able to go into a bit more detail with this one. So it will be a bit of a longer episode. I hope you stick around and hear all of it. And then I'll let you know at the end how you can help and, of course, where to find all of the extra details of the Justice for Luke page, which is run by Luke's mum and dad. So let's jump in, and we'll start by saying welcome to Justice for Luke Gilbert. I'm going to do this episode a little differently to others for a few reasons, but mostly because this story is different to others, in the sense that we don't have a missing person and we don't have a cold case. We have someone who had their whole life ahead of them, who died way too young and in a way you would just never expect. I've said it before and I'll say it again and likely again and again, that the media and authorities have so much to answer for. What is the justice system for if it's not to help us? What I have experienced personally and professionally is an unjust system. And in this case, I want to be clear. We have a young man at 24 years old with his whole life ahead of him. No one is perfect. No one has a clean history of just being the perfect model citizen, whatever that may be. And I want you to consider this when you listen to this story. How easy is it for us to stereotype a person based on their gender, their age, and whatever else we like to categorize them with? The internet is the absolute worst for it, and the comments that people make, we can only assume, are from people who are so perfect and have never put a foot wrong. So good for them. I'm going to present this case as what you will see it for, what the media will present it as, how the police want you to hear it, and then I'm going to present it to you again with the real story, with evidence that was excluded from the reports and the media events. So I've just typed his name into Google, Luke Gilbert, and I'm going to use basic OSINT to present this, how the system wants it presented. This is directly from 9 News, and I quote, "Man provoked Queensland Police into fatal shooting, coroner finds." Luke Brian Gilbert, aged 24, was shot dead by 2 police officers at 12:20 a.m. on the 1st of October 2022 at Airlie Beach in Queensland. This article will tell you this. Minutes before the shooting, Gilbert had left a nightclub after consuming alcohol at various locations in the hours beforehand. Gilbert proceeded to bump into one of the officers' arms while they were patrolling the street. After the officers asked if Gilbert was all right and what he was holding underneath his jumper, he produced a folding knife with an 8-centimetre blade and said, "Shoot me, I dare ya." Despite repeated directions to stop moving and drop the knife, Gilbert increased the speed at which he approached the officers, telling them, "Fucking shoot me, fuckwit." The 2 officers fired their handguns a total of 5 times, with 3 bullets striking Gilbert in the upper right chest, causing his rapid death despite the officers' attempt to provide first aid. Now, here's one from ABC News. Again, I have typed his name into Google, and this is what we have. It is titled, "Coronial Inquest Hears Police Were Forced to Fatally Shoot Luke Gilbert in Airlie Beach." Now, this specific article literally starts with, and I quote, "A crime expert had told a coronial inquest the 2 police officers who shot and killed a young man were forced to take the action they did." Essentially, the coroner ruled that Luke contributed to his own death by way of victim-precipitated homicide, which is basically when the victim's behaviour or actions provoke or contribute to their own death, essentially rendering Luke responsible. Now, just to add, Associate Professor Amber McKinley was not given statements by family. She was not given statements by friends or workmates, by people who had previously been in relationships with Luke, or Luke's girlfriend at the time, who had been with him all morning, afternoon, and evening of the day he was killed. When the barrister said, "You didn't have that information," McKinley said, "I didn't know I was able to." Now, why would the coroner not give her these statements? Is it because it would go against the narrative that they were following? That's something for you to think about while I tell you the actual story. Let me reintroduce you to Luke Brian Gilbert, the firstborn child and son of Mr. and Mrs. Gilbert, an older brother to a brother and a sister. He was the first grandchild of his family. He was born in Manchester, UK, before moving to Australia, where his parents wanted to come for, and yes, this is absolutely accurate, for a better and safer life with more opportunities. Let that one sink in. Luke loved travelling. He liked camping, fishing, four-wheel driving. He always remained in close contact with his family, even when he was travelling, particularly when he travelled to Queensland. His family remember him as a very loving son, a loving brother, and a loving friend. A friend of Luke's has described him as being super dedicated to his family, saying that the people Luke cherished the most would be his family. He gave his whole heart to his family he loved dearly. Luke's girlfriend at the time, Elizabeth Meller, described Luke as a caring, pretty quiet, very generous person. She said, "He's different with everyone else than he is with me. When I say this, I mean he is just a little bit more standoffish and a little bit quieter." She stated that he had a new job and he worked hard at it. She also said that Luke was making a really solid effort to do better in his life. In the more recent times, before he was killed, Luke and his girlfriend had started to attend church together, and Luke was actually baptised in September of 2022. So just to reiterate, Luke was 24, okay? The day he was shot and killed by the Queensland Police was the 1st of October 2022. And in 2022, prior to this incident, he was travelling Australia before settling down in Queensland, so he actually never got to go home. He was living and working in Townsville and saving up for his next trip, and at the time he drove a ute, and he was usually wearing workwear, and that had included a utility penknife, which we would know here as like maybe a Milwaukee knife or something like that, with the little 7-centimetre blades, and you can clip them to your belt. The day he was killed, he had actually travelled to Airlie Beach to assist his girlfriend. She was having issues with her car, so she had contacted him, asked for help, and he was on his way to help her with that. After that was sorted, the pair decided to go out to the pub just after midnight. Now, this is where it all went sideways. So just after midnight, Luke allegedly walked past these two cops. So there was obviously cops patrolling the streets. He was about to cross the road and he passed another two cops. Luke passed these two cops in the most appropriate gap possible, but he had actually brushed past one of the officers, and as he did that, he said, "Excuse me," to excuse himself through, not anything vile, and one of the cops, who we will go by as Murray, he responded with, no worries, mate." So Murray actually did later admit to minimal contact in that interaction, and that was the first interaction of the evening. So as Luke continued on walking, he went past the second cop, who is Liam Forster. And Liam Forster says in his peripheral vision, he saw the prior interaction between Luke and Murray, which we refer to as like that brush past. And "Excuse me, no worries, mate." So Forster then allegedly called out to Luke for really no reason at all, saying, "Good on you, mate." So Luke continued walking across the road and ignored the comment. Forster then proceeded to say, "Okay, see you later, tough guy." Now, the cop Murray claims to not have heard Forster's comment, despite being closer in proximity to Forster than Luke was, so that's a bit odd, but we'll get back to that. But upon hearing that comment, Luke then turned around and came back to the curb and stood still. So during this whole interaction, there are body-worn cameras, and they began recording audio at this point. Forster's body-worn camera records audio, hearing Forster say, "What's that? What have you got there?" At this time, Luke stood with his hands free, and he had his work penknife clipped to his belt, which was not visible at that time. In compliance, Luke proceeds to put his hands inside his pants to retrieve the penknife to show him as requested, as he said, "What's that? What have you got there?" So he did that. He held it down by his side and stood still. Murray and Forster agree in the inquest that Luke was complying at this point in time. Murray pulls his gun and points it toward Luke, and Forster then follows suit. So we've got two officers standing there holding their guns out towards Luke, who is presenting his utility knife that he had clipped to his pants that was requested to be seen. Then Forster shines his 1000 lumens torch, which was attached to his gun, in Luke's face, and they both start to walk backwards. Now, when they're walking backwards, they are kind of walking in a way to make Luke follow them and go around the corner, because they were obviously on a strip and there was a corner there. So they were walking backwards, like essentially luring him around the corner. They repeatedly shouted at Luke to drop the knife, and the first two officers that Luke passed earlier, so you can remember I said he passed two officers with no issues at all, so they noticed that there was an interaction happening and they came over. And one of those officers was Constable Anthony Parkinson. He also took his gun out of his holster at this point. So now we have three officers holding their guns at Luke. Luke had been drinking that day. He was intoxicated at that point in time. And his tox reports show that he was 3 times over the drink drive limit. Just to prove a point there. Yes, he had been drinking. He'd been at the pub. And this was a bit of a drinking district. Luke didn't drop the penknife at this point in time, and he had said, "Do it," "Shoot me then, fuckers." He was referencing to the guns that the 3 police were holding up to him. Now, as the cops proceeded to walk backwards, Luke was walking forwards towards them. So we've got the cops walking backwards, Luke walking towards them. Now, he was not moving at any speed. At this point, Luke still had his penknife by his side, and he was approximately measured around 15 feet away from the cops when he made that comment. Now, at this stage, the cops actually fired a volley of bullets into the Safe Night precinct only 18 seconds after Forster challenged Luke. So this is a very, very quick interaction, 18 seconds, and they're firing shots. Now, the gap at the time between the cops and Luke was bigger at the end of their interaction than it was at the start. So if anybody's moving quicker, it's very general maths. The police were actually moving faster, at a rate faster than what Luke was. They had actually increased that gap. Murray allegedly then fired 1 bullet and Forster allegedly fired 4 bullets, and Forster had actually fired the first shot, which then sparked Murray's fire. Now, 3 of these bullets hit Luke's chest and 2 hit cars. No ballistics report conducted into this case at all. But forensics obviously had to attend, and they indicated the total number of bullets is not 5. We will come back to that, but I want to highlight that. Now, upon being shot in the chest several times, Luke fell to the ground immediately upon being hit, and he was immediately laying unresponsive on the ground, dead/dying. And then Forster points his gun towards Luke, and Murray says, "Flip him. Put his hands behind his back before we search him," and they proceeded to handcuff Luke. So he would have been face down, unconscious or dying if not already dead, and they've handcuffed him. I'm so sorry. They arrested him. They emptied his pockets, and then 4 minutes it took before any first aid was given. Now, we have Constable Daniel Simic. He was the 4th officer on scene, and he could not locate the medical kit. He had no idea where it was and couldn't find it. When he finally found it, he applied the chest seals incorrectly. So the chest seals are for chest compressions, and he put those on incorrectly, so that rendered them useless. Then they moved the cuffs from his back to his front, even though he was entirely unresponsive. It was 7 minutes or thereabouts before police attempt to poorly administer CPR. 7 minutes. Another officer then arrives on scene, and this is a female officer, and she is the one who suggested removing the handcuffs as Luke was now deceased. So here's the real story. Then we have Ian Levers, who is key in this case as well. So he was the police union president at the time. And he actually gave a press conference on the day that Luke was killed, in which he gave many false statements to the media. So I'm gonna read you a little bit of that. First, I will read you a few lines from his statement as he presented it. Now, these are a few statements as he said it, okay? So he approached them and engaged them in conversation. So he's talking about Luke approaching police officers and engaging them in conversation, which is incorrect. All of a sudden, he pulled a knife from his hoodie. Also incorrect. He lunged at the officers. Also incorrect. Let me just say, in the middle of this, might I add, there's absolutely no bias here. I really try not to take any bias, and I like to take facts as they are. But when you have body-worn camera footage, that's pretty hard evidence. So I'm just going to throw that out there. He also said he threatened the officers. They had no other option. Had taser been an option, it would have been used. They did all they could to resolve this matter peacefully. No innocent person was put in danger. They immediately rendered first aid. He had substantial mental health issues. He had a criminal history. I can just summarize all of these as like an incredible miscarriage of justice. What is wrong with this statement? You could be thinking that. I hope you're not, but there's a lot wrong with this statement. Let me walk you through the issues here. And these aren't so much a matter of an opinion. They've been proven to be factual rebuttals, so let's talk about it. Like I said, it's been through court, and the body-worn cameras has been used as evidence. Now, let's go to the statement. He approached them and engaged them in conversation. Luke actually walked past them when he was crossing the road. There was no problem, and also no reason for Luke to engage in further conversation with any of the cops that he passed. until Forster decided to make his remark as Luke was walking away. Of course, Luke did say, "Excuse me," and that first officer said, "No worries," so there was really no issue at all. He also said all of a sudden he pulled a knife from his hoodie. Luke was not wearing a hoodie. So that's that. He also had his penknife clipped to his pants. So when he was asked what he had there, he had removed the penknife from his pants and presented it to his side. He lunged at the officers. There's video footage to argue this, actually. So he was not seen to lunge at the police at any point in time. He threatened the officers. Well, as per the body-worn camera footage, he made no threats verbally. And in regard to the penknife, it remained by his side at all times and not to the anterior of his body. So it was not held in front of his body or waved around, at the police officers or anything like that. This one gets me. This kills me. They had no other option. Okay. They admit that they had other options for a start. And aside from their admission to this, there's always other options before shooting to kill someone. And don't tell me that shooting someone in the chest several times is not a shoot to kill. Had a taser been an option, it would have been used. That is just absolutely ridiculous. They were at the optimal distance, actually, to use their taser if they needed it. There were several of them. One of them could have used their taser, or two of them, or even three, which they obviously feel they did need some sort of assistance. There was zero attempt to use the taser, so I think that's really ridiculous. And considering they actually widened the gap or the distance between themselves and Luke in the end, I wouldn't believe that it would be such a rush to shoot somebody. But anyway, they did all they could to resolve this matter peacefully. Well, they immediately drew their guns and pointed them at Luke. There's nothing peaceful about that. No innocent person put in danger. Well, that's interesting because two bullets that were fired had actually hit two separate vehicles. One was behind a bush out of sight of both officers, and one was approximately 60 metres up the street with tinted windows. So I would say that's putting people in danger for sure, but I don't know the definition. Immediately rendered first aid. It was 4 minutes until any first aid was given. Luke lay unresponsive, dying on the pavement when they turned him over, handcuffed his arms behind his back, arrested him, emptied his pockets, all before giving first aid. It was approximately 7 minutes before CPR was even attempted. The only reason that they removed handcuffs was when they were asked to do so by the female officer who said Luke was dead. Had she not been on the scene and requested they be removed, would they have been removed at all? I honestly don't think so. He had substantial mental health issues. Before I touch on that, I just want to say that I don't think that gives any extra reason to just shoot someone in the chest. I just don't. I still think that tasers and shooting to disable, not shooting to kill. There are many, many other ways around that. But anyway, but as for his mental health, in 2018, Luke actually had a close friend of his pass away, which really impacted him emotionally. So that's about as far as his mental health expands. He had a criminal history. Well, when he was suffering from the ill mental health due to the loss of his friends, police were involved for his welfare. He did have drink drive charges, which is obviously not relevant to this situation, but it is entirely relevant to the credibility of QPS, mind you. 4 minutes is plenty of time to take life-saving action. In 4 minutes, what can you do? You can fill a kettle, put it on its stand, turn it on, wait for the water to boil, and make a cup of tea. That's enough time to try and save a life. You can also sit down and listen to an entire song. 4 minutes here in this situation in Luke's life would have been the difference between life and death, and I believe it. It's the length of your favourite song. It's enough time to apply pressure to a wound, call 000, and potentially keep someone breathing until help arrives, or at least give them the chance to make it. I want to talk about the CPR delay timeline and its impact, because between 0 to 1 minutes, the heart has just stopped. So immediate CPR can keep oxygenated blood flowing to the brain, which is essential, and survival chances are quite high with this early action. Between minutes 1 to 3, brain cells begin to die. Okay, so CPR started now can still double or triple a person's chance of survival. Then between minutes 4 to 6, permanent brain damage can begin if no oxygen is getting back to the brain. So every second starts to count now. Then we've got between minutes 7 to 10. The chances of survival drop dramatically here, especially without CPR or defib. So the brain damage from the loss of oxygen is very likely and recovery is very uncertain at this point in time. So every minute that passes without CPR, a person's chance of survival drops 7 to 10%. And after 10 minutes with no CPR, the chances of survival are less than 5%. And that's huge, you guys. And Ian Levers, as you can remember, stated, this is a new comment that he said, "It is really important to look at this and analyse this. It is so vital, and if there are any learnings that we can gather from around Australia and look at other coronial inquests that have taken place in overseas and see what can be done." And I would just really love to comment on that, okay? So with all due respect to Mr. Levers, I think I can come up with a few things that you, Mr. Levers, and QPS can learn from this, from Luke. Given that in 2022 to 2023, New South Wales Police shot 8 people, Vic Police shot 1, South Australia Police shot 1, WA Police shot 2, what did QPS do? How many people did QPS shoot? 14. That's a high number. 14 people. I can also tell you based off my own work and my cases that were current when I was writing this very episode, all of the cases that I had, bar one, were in Queensland. Why is that, Mr. Levers? Why were all my cases from Queensland, bar one? The Queensland Human Rights Commission ruled QPS have been facing several issues, including systemic sexism and racism. Just have a quick Google, you'll be able to find it. You can have a little search on the internet about QPS and you can find your own articles that speak for themselves. And I will save the massive failure of the Queensland Forensic Services for our upcoming episode on systemic injustice in the Queensland Sunshine State, because I have a whole episode coming up on that, because the very, very, very large majority of my cases and my families that I work for, their incident happened in Queensland. I'd like to know why that is. And while I let you think about that, I want to talk about the legal and ethical concerns behind this, because legally and ethically, use of force must be reasonable and necessary. And of course, for the safety of the officers, for the safety of the person in question, and for the safety of the community. Okay? But handcuffing an unresponsive person typically cannot be justified under these principles, as they pose no active threat or resistance. Don't tell me that after shooting somebody in the chest several times that has made them fall to the ground and be unresponsive, that person is an active threat or that person is likely to resist. The duty of care overrides security in medical emergencies. That is a legal and ethical concern. If a person is unresponsive, the priority must be checking for breathing, airway, circulation, and administering first aid, not restraint. I can't be any more clear about that. Your duty of care overrides security in medical emergencies. Not to mention the potential breach of human rights in many jurisdictions, restraining a medically vulnerable or unresponsive person can be seen as inhumane or degrading treatment, especially if it delays life-saving care. Luke did not have to die from this. You did not have to kill him here. This did not have to happen. And the police exceptions, and there are exceptions for the police, but they look like this. In rare situations, such as during tactical operations, law enforcement may temporarily handcuff for officer safety. Okay? However, they are legally required to check responsiveness, render aid, and remove restraints as soon as it is safe. This is always subject to internal and external review if harm occurs. So the legal framework for handcuffing, and this is from the Police Powers and Responsibilities Act 2000, also known as the PPRA. So police officers may use force, including handcuffs, if it is reasonably necessary to ensure the safety of the person or others, to prevent the person from escaping or prevent the destruction of evidence. However, the use of handcuffs must be proportionated to the situation. Applying handcuffs to an unresponsive individual, someone who is unconscious or otherwise incapacitated, raises significant legal and ethical concerns. May I repeat? Significant legal and ethical concerns. This is a person that was dying, if not dead, and the QPS have handcuffed this man before rendering first aid. Sorry, they handcuffed him and then waited 4 minutes before trying to render first aid because they didn't think about that. And then when they did think about that, they didn't even know where their medical kit was. Handcuffing an unresponsive person may be considered excessive force, as it is unlikely that such an individual poses an immediate threat or risk of escape. So it's very black and white. Now, the Criminal Code, which is from the 1899 in Queensland, stipulates that any use of force beyond what is justified by law is unlawful. I am highlighting that word in yellow and I am making the letters bold. Unlawful. Moreover, the Queensland Police Service's Operational Procedures Manual, or the OPM, actually emphasises that any use of force, including handcuffing, must be continuously assessed and justified based on the individual's behaviour and the context of the situation. Behaviour. Please talk to me about Luke's behaviour when you handcuffed him, when he was unresponsive. This means that officers are expected to evaluate the necessity of restraints continually and had to remove them when they are no longer required. I'm sorry, I have read over and over and over my script for this case, and it's taken me so long because I wanted to get it so right, because it just so upsets me that the family are going through this and that Luke had to die in this situation and had to be killed, and they're just surrounded by systemic injustice here. Next, I'm going to move into the utility knife, because this came up as an issue. The Queensland Police brought this up as an issue. Actually, they obviously had an issue with it early on. Now, a utility knife, such as a box cutter or a folding knife, the ones that you can sort of like flick out, I think people call them pocket knives, yeah. They're lawful when used for legitimate purposes like work, fishing, and things like that. So that's under Section 51 of the Weapons Act of 1990. So possessing a knife in a public place is prohibited unless you have a reasonable excuse. So if you were going to get lunch or something and you've just been from work and you've got that clipped to your pants, you're all good. Now, a Category M weapon is something that includes knives and devices specifically designed for concealment or as weapons. So Category M weapons are prohibited without special authorization. For example, knives disguised as everyday items like belt buckle knives, flick knives, butterfly knives, anything like that. Now, possessing a Category M weapon without that authorization is illegal, regardless of the intent. The coroner was informed with evidence by the family that it was not a Category M knife. So they were aware of that. It was a utility knife. It does not fall under the Category M knife section at all. It's a very easy thing to look up. Yet they still decided to publish in the findings that it was. Why is that? And also, while I'm on that question, here's a few more questions that I have for QPS. And you're probably thinking, QPS aren't listening to your podcast. I beg to differ, because I do have the paid feature on LinkedIn where I get to watch who goes and looks at my profile, and I will let you know that a lot of them are from QPS. So I would love them to listen to this and have a discussion about these questions. Because what really could have been done differently to make the situation safe and result in no deaths? I would honestly love them to answer that. What happened to shoot to disable? Why was it shoot to kill? What is the excuse, the reasonable excuse, for handcuffing a person who's unresponsive? Unresponsive. I can think of a few things that would have redirected this situation, honestly, that wouldn't have resulted in Luke's death. I'm no police officer, nor do I have any interest to be one. However, I don't find it appropriate to sarcastically provoke an individual when you're a person whose job it is to help people be safe, or just be a regular person and not create a problem. That behaviour is uncalled for. If Luke's interaction with the police that night ended when he had accidentally brushed past the first officer and apologised as he did, then things would be very different, and I believe it 100%. From here, implementing the use of a taser before walking backward to lure Luke around a corner was definitely possible, in my opinion. If it was possible to fire so many rounds, you could have definitely used a taser. It wasn't like there was only one officer there. There were several. If there were a genuine concern regarding the utility knife, then this would be reasonable, using a taser. And again, Luke would be here to tell his side of the story today, but he's not. He's dead, and his parents are fighting for his justice every single day, and it's falling on deaf ears. Why? The Gilbert family very reasonably requests that the review of the police conduct, or more appropriately, misconduct, be done by an unrelated body. They don't want the police misconduct to be looked at by police. They want somebody unbiased, unrelated to the police force to look at this misconduct and call it for what it is. This means that cops don't investigate cops. This is fair. This gives a fair and unbiased result. So many points of view were not heard at this inquest. Luke was basically killed and then killed a second time in the inquest by not allowing his side of the story to be told, not allowing his girlfriend to testify, not including essential and relevant information regarding the surrounding circumstances, not allowing people's impact statements. This is so important, and it's just a very basic human right. It gives context to the situation. You can't judge a situation based on one version of events. And that is then reviewed by the people who work for that version of events. How is that justice? I just don't get it. But before I go into the executive summary of this case, I want to ask you a question that I want you to consider. You listening, not QPS, just you, an everyday listener. What would you do? If this was your child, your brother, your partner, what would you do? Help us help the Gilbert family get justice for Luke, and get justice for themselves, and get justice for you, who should be protected by the police service. They should be protecting you and us and them, everybody. This shouldn't have happened. Now, I'm going to read to you this executive summary that was sent to me by Luke's mum. And it's got a lot of facts in here that are going to leave you a little bit speechless. And it adds, again, a lot of context to the actual story. So let's go. If you've been here since the start, now's a good time to pause me, go make a coffee, and sit back down. And we'll get into it. So pause now and then come back. All right, so the coronial findings into Luke Gilbert's death, which again was when he was killed by police on the 1st of October 2022. The findings are fundamentally flawed. They're factually inaccurate, procedurally unfair, and they result in numerous miscarriages of justice. We have been shown fraudulent evidence, denial of full disclosure, omission of relevant and material facts, and the systemic failure of multiple institutions to uphold their statutory and ethical duties. Now, point 1, failure to provide or consider ballistics evidence. Pardon? What do you mean? This person was killed through ballistics. Why was there no ballistics done on this crime scene? Discrepancies in the number of shots fired is a massive thing. There was reported variously as there was 4 shots, no, there was 5, no, there was 6. Well, there was a lack of forensic accounting for each bullet, yet forensic photos show 6 shell cases and conflicting accounts from officers involved, which then raise the questions and concerns about whether the actual shooters or shooter and sequence of events have been truthfully identified and examined. That's not giving any context to anything. That crime scene should have been dealt with immediately and correctly. Point 2, we have reliance on false and unchallenged witness statements. Like we said earlier, several witness statements were contradicted by video evidence that were admitted without the opportunity for cross-examination. So these statements, some from persons with known ties to the police officers who were involved, were relied upon in preference to the clear and more objective CCTV evidence. New witnesses have since come forward with information about police following Luke and approaching witnesses before Luke was killed. Oh, you guys, it hurts my brain. Point 3, mischaracterization of the knife. As we said, they categorized it as a Category M weapon. Well, the Milwaukee folding pen knife found on Luke was incorrectly classified as a prohibited weapon, despite being sold legally as a controlled tool, a utility tool. This mischaracterization prejudiced findings and was used to imply criminality where none existed. They're just trying to pin something on him. They're trying to make him out to be something that he is not to justify what they've done. Point 4, we have ignored evidence of prior relationship between the officer Forster and Luke's partner. This is my favourite point. We have sworn statements alleging prior contact and rejected romantic interest between Constable Forster and Miss Mellor. These were disregarded. Evidence of possible motive and conduct unbecoming of a police officer was not investigated or admitted into evidence. Evidence that Constable Forster was watching Miss Mellor and Luke eat breakfast in a local cafe hours before shooting and killing Luke has been covered up and has been refused in the investigation. There have been attempts by Miss Mellor to contact ethical standards regarding her testimony, and they have been ignored. Yes, you can rewind and listen to that again, and yes, this is absolutely correct information. Point 5, false claims of no prior contact with the deceased. Well, here we go. CCTV contradicts officer claims that they had no prior knowledge of or interactions with Luke. But CCTV footage shows officers observing and following Luke throughout the evening. This evidence was omitted, and when sections were used, it was misrepresented. 2 of the police officers were not even questioned at the inquest, and the evidence in the prosecution of Constable Collins, who committed crimes against Luke at the time of his death, has been withheld entirely from the inquest and denied to the family. The impact of his actions has also never been investigated. Point 6, withholding of vital CCTV footage. Police failed to disclose crucial footage showing Luke's final walk and officers' actions. Requests for this footage have been denied without justification. Witnesses report seeing footage that has not been disclosed and was reportedly forced to be deleted by Whitsunday's police from the venue. Point 7, tampering with CCTV time and date stamps. Whitsunday's regional council cameras are known to carry time stamps, yet those on the ones that were seen have been removed. Therefore, they can't be matched to the body-worn camera times. Requests for original CCTV footage have been denied, despite being in the index to brief of evidence. Point 8 is the admittance of flawed expert reports without procedural fairness. Expert witnesses relied solely on police-supplied body-worn camera footage, CCTV that has been digitally altered, and second-hand medical records. They were not given full balanced information, again, context, nor were they made aware of inconsistencies in the material provided. They failed to consult family, and all attempts to correct factually incorrect information contained in the medical records have been ignored. Shocking. Point 9, false public statements by Queensland Police representative. Wow, I'm losing it. This is when you know that I'm going on a tangent. But Ian Levers, who we spoke about earlier, his public commentaries shortly after the incident violated coronial guidelines, and that can actually constitute an attempt to pervert the course of justice. So the coroner declined to compel him to give evidence. Point 10, forgery of Form 1, which was a consent to autopsy. A forged Form 1 by a Whitsunday's police officer was used to conduct a full autopsy against the family wishes. Ethical standards command, and the coroner failed to act or investigate. This violation is against Luke's human rights and obviously against the family's wishes to no autopsy. Point 11, collusion in misrepresenting sequence of events. Multiple parties, like the police and experts and legal reps, presented a uniform but factually inaccurate version of the key 18-second interaction, which was actually contrary to the CCTV footage. Then point 12 is tampering with the court transcripts and audio. Segments of inquest transcripts and recordings have been altered or omitted. The legal reps declined to act on this, and they cited promotions of prior lawyers. Point 13 is the violation of human rights. The Human Rights Act of 2019 in Queensland guarantees fairness and due process, which were denied. A formal human rights complaint has been submitted in parallel, which outlines the 7 human rights violations in this case alone. And the last point, point 14, was the failure of the CCC oversight. So the CCC report is falsified with incorrect and inconsistent information. The CCC completed their oversight into the ESC investigation after only 4 days. They have failed to investigate these facts or give answers when they were pointed out the issues here, and so that's also going nowhere. Now, given the systemic nature of the issues and the multiple institutions or peak bodies involved, the family believe that the matter also warrants an independent judicial or parliamentary inquiry to ensure accountability and reform because of these following findings that they've noted down. They said, 1, contrary to the weight of available evidence. 2, the product of procedural unfairness. 3, rely on inadmissible or tainted evidence. 4, fail to consider relevant and credible new material. And 5, undermine public confidence in the integrity of the coronial system. I would like to see this be reviewed independently, and I would also actually like this to go to a parliamentary inquiry. I think this is really important, and I think it's really important for the Queensland police system, and I think it's important for the wider community. I think this is a public safety issue, and I think it should be seen as a public safety issue. Obviously, we're not all saints, and yes, Luke had been drinking. Who has not been out on a night drinking? Sorry, inappropriate timing. My alarm to pick my kids up from school just started going off. That's how long I've been on here for. But I do think this is a public health and safety issue, 100%. I think that it should definitely be seen independently. I also agree with the family that police should not investigate police misconduct. That should be done from a peak unrelated body to the police service. And I honestly think that there are not one, but numerous avenues that could have been taken to have Luke still with us today and have the family still have their son and brother and boyfriend and friend. I think this is a huge miscarriage of justice. And I'm really sad for them. And I watch their page every day, and I see every single day they're posting photos, videos, they're talking, they're writing, they're putting their whole life into this for justice for Luke. And like I said earlier, Luke wasn't just killed once, he was killed twice. They killed him again in that inquest. That inquest absolutely killed him. And it killed his family. And you should be hurting from hearing it too. Because like I said, this is a public issue. This is not just a Luke problem or Luke's family's problem. This is all of our problems. We all need to be acting to help keep the community safe. It could be anyone. Even if, we all make stupid decisions. We all, have a drink here and there. Well, maybe not all of us, but we've all made dumb decisions, let's be honest. And can we even say that about Luke here? Did he even really do anything? Could we flip the narrative on them and let the truth rule for a second and just say that if Forster had not yelled out to him again when he had already walked by, would Luke still be alive? Yes, he would be. That's the answer. That's the truth. Would he have still brushed past that cop and said, "Excuse me"? Yes. Would that cop still been like, "No worries, mate"? Yes. That would have been the end of the interaction. Luke would still be here today. That's where the problem lies, okay? And the next problem lies with accountability, and people need to be held accountable for Luke, for Luke's family, and for public safety. So I just want to say thank you so much if you stuck around and listened to this episode. This is one that I'm going to continue to go into, I think, because I would love to do all that I can to help Luke's family. They work so hard for justice, and I think we can do great things as a community when we come together and help each other out. And I've seen it because you guys have done it. We've organised search groups in other states. you guys are awesome. I love and appreciate you all so much, and how we're creating a normal society out of what we're doing here, of people who want the same thing. We just want to be happy. We just want to be safe. We don't want to lose people, and we can work together for justice for Luke and his family. And you can help by sharing this. You can share his name, talk to your friends about this, jump on the pages for him. They have a Facebook page, they have a TikTok page. It's called Justice for Luke. And yeah, update yourself, have a listen. There's some videos on there that are really insightful. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it here, obviously in a bit of a somber way, but I hope that you've learned something. I hope that Luke's story is going to help us bring justice and bring people closer together. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. So thank you for joining us today. I hope you have enjoyed it here. If you have, you can subscribe to stay up to date on new episodes, or you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. You can help us out by subscribing to our paid episodes on Spotify only, or making a direct donation to allow us to help more families. You can also join in on the case discussions and make a case request there on our Facebook group. You can find the link to our Facebook group in our podcast notes, and you can also take a look at our current cases on our website. But as always, stay curious, stay informed, and until next time, trust your instincts and keep seeking the truth.